I started out as an engineer, right? And people always ask me, why did I choose engineering? Well, we came from a poor family, so we needed to make money, if you know what I mean, right? But so I got into engineering. And I liked engineering, but I think 3, 4 years into engineering, coding and stuff like that, you realize it's not fitting my personality. So I remember I started looking around for different things, and I became an application engineer, which is a little more far removed from, a little removed from actual engineering. So I'm not coding, I'm just plugging in boxes and designing systems. And that was nice. I did that for a while. And then I got to travel with a lot of salespeople. And that was kind of like my first exposure, because I was like the engineering. We used to call them four-legged calls. A four-legged calls mean you go with the salesperson, his 2 legs, your 2 legs, 4 legs. And so I got to be around salespeople. And eventually I started figuring out, I think I kind of like this. And then I figured out they make more money on you. So I thought that was also a good thing. So yeah, that's how I got into sales. When I started doing AI, it was more of an expert system. So back in one of my earlier college interns, I worked for a company called Honeywell, which is it was the Undersea Systems Division, and we were working on a torpedo system. And so if you watch the movie The Hunt for Red October, probably before your time, but it's a good movie. The torpedo in there uses a rule-based architecture, if, then, go to, but, that type of decision tree process. And back then, we're talking a little while back, we didn't have the data, we didn't have the storage power, we just didn't have any machine learning. And so fast forward, today we're now in a situation where it isn't about whether AI is real or not. It's real, we're using it. If you use Alexa, Siri, all these things, AI is everywhere. It's going to become proliferate. One of the best statements I heard was from the founder of Wired magazine. I forgot his name, is something Kelly. And he said something that to understand AI, you should think about it as a utility like electricity. He says it'll be everywhere. You just won't see it. It's working in the background. So having said that, how does that tie into sales? I got curious about AI in sales when I was in Korea, Seoul. I went down to, we were working with a large healthcare group, and Anya, they had in their telecenter, they had about, I'll say 100 people. And they're making calls, right? And what surprised me was, or impressed me was, that they could actually analyze the calls, the voice, using natural language processing and understanding. They were able to look at the language that the salesperson was using. And let's say you made 100 calls in a day, to make this a simple example. Let's say you closed 20% of your deals, which leaves you with 80 people that didn't close. So who do you call back? Do you call them back? In what order should you call them back? And based on the AI they were using at the time, they were using a lot of sentiment analysis, bag of words type of algorithms. They could determine who was more likely to buy than not, and then they would prioritize the calls for you. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? This is amazing. So that's when I realized, okay, we're back. In other words, that whole dry spell of no AI. And I got into researching about what AI was. And it's fascinating. Fascinating what's happening. My book, Sales Ex Machina, How Artificial Intelligence is Changing the World of Selling, that was the book that I kind of put together after doing all the research. And what's interesting is that when we look at recommendation engines, I think that's powerful. Again, Netflix, Amazon, see a movie, here's a product. Customers who bought this also bought that. But then move that into the business world. And what we're finding is that if you look at selling today, this is a really interesting perspective. There's only 4 ways to grow your business. 4. That's it. Everybody wants to make it complicated, but there's only 4 ways to grow your business. 1 is client acquisition. That's 1. Number 2, client retention, right? Number 3, upselling and cross-selling. And then the 4th one would be reactivation, people who bought but haven't bought from you in the past, right? Client acquisition is tougher, right? In today's market, client acquisition is costlier. Retention is a great strategy. One study showed that if you increase retention by 5%, it drops to the bottom 80-90% of your profit margin. So it's very profitable. But the one that's not really looked at is upselling and cross-selling. And right there, if you just mine your existing customer base using AI, you can grow your revenues up to 30%. That's quite significant if you think about it. Now, when we look at upselling and cross-selling, what's the challenge? The challenge is a lot of salespeople don't know how to upsell, and then they don't know what to upsell. Now, what if the AI algorithm says, look, let me give you the simplified version. Here's a printout of all your customers. Here's what they bought. Based on our historical data, here's the next step in the recommendation for the upsell and the cross sell. And now the salesperson doesn't have to think about what should I try to upsell. The machine is telling you, look, based on this, here's the prediction. Here's what they'll buy. And that provides what I call a more frictionless approach to selling. We all talk about the point of singularity, right? That's where the machines become smarter than you and all that stuff. Like people like Kurzweil and people like that predict that, in 40 to 50, by 2050, we'll reach a point of singularity. And so, first of all, we're not there yet. I think it's going to be very difficult because what AI can't duplicate. Well, first of all, let's look at AI. And when you look at deep learning, convolutional networks and all that, it's all about how do we mimic, how do we imitate a neural network system within the brain, right? That's what we're doing, just a neural. But the thing is, even within the actual neural network of the brain that we understand today, we really don't understand the brain. We just don't. So I personally believe that timeline's a little further out. When it comes to like innovation, creativity, I think the machine falls short. I think the best way of looking at it, and I talk about this in the book, is that you should look at AI as a way of augmenting the actual salesperson. Now, where does AI play? I always tell people the simplest way to understand AI in terms of where it plays and where it's going to replace people is to list out every task you do to get your job done. And anything that's repeatable or duplicatable, the AI will take over that, right? But the part about the interaction, I don't think that's possible. I think that's very hard to do. But that brings up a good question, though, is that today, here's the interesting thing. So AI is coming at it from this way, giving you basically, look, we're thinking better, we can help you. But at the same time, what's also interesting is customers are finding their way to the products by themselves. So this is also interesting. So the customer journey is becoming, in 2011, a book came out here that was called The Challenger Sale. And in 2011, it said that the buyer was 57% into the buying process, 57%. Now today, you fast forward, we're looking 80, 90, 95% into the buying process. In other words, the world of selling is almost disappearing, and the world of buying is on the rise. The need for salespeople is really just becoming lower. I think the need for customer success or customer journey people is increasing. Marketing is now taking a more prominent role. I used to laugh at marketing, by the way. Now it's like I respect them greatly because they condition the customer before they get there. And so when the customer contacts you, you think about it, Anya. When was the last time you talked to a salesperson? And if you did talk to a salesperson, you weren't looking to be sold. You were either looking to clarify some information, confirm what you already knew, or maybe they gave you the confidence to make the buying decision. But there was no real selling going on. I would say that the majority of conversations that we have in order to sell something, it's pretty straightforward. So for example, let me give you an example. If I'm trying to sell you health insurance, I can actually, with my AI, maneuver all the questions that much better. My knowledge base is that much deeper. So for example, if I said, Anya, what if I did this and I got into this accident, but I didn't have that and that happened and this happened and could I do that within 30 days? And you'd be like, now the machine, the algorithm would be able to say, yes, you can, because it would actually be able to go through its algorithm and understand that data. Now, where the AI begins to fall apart in terms of, this is where I would agree with you, in terms of selling, is when you get to a complex sale. So for example, now it's an enterprise sale. And if you move to the enterprise sale, one could argue that, well, I don't know if the machine will be able to replace, because sometimes you need to talk to a person and there's some nuances and some details. And so in that case, you would be absolutely right. I don't think it'll be a while before that happens. But again, keep in mind what's happening is that a lot of see, that was with the assumption that the buyer doesn't know a lot, that they need to talk to somebody because it's so complex. But what if the buyer journey becomes so educational that the person really gets to the end point, the 90% mark, let's call it, and says, I know enough to make a decision. I just need you to confirm certain things. Then I would interrogate you, the AI, and say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I need. Here's what I'm building. Will this work? And the system will go, yes. And so that's why I think it's interesting that if you just argue that, will the AI replace somebody? Not right away. But what's also happening is the consumer is getting that much smarter. And I think that's what's fascinating. So you've seen this two things, AI and consumers getting smarter. And I think in the middle, the salesperson is going to be squeezed out. I mean, will we ever eliminate salespeople? I don't think so. But I think their job is transforming. I don't think so. That again, there you're getting into the gray area of the AI. Can it be intuitive, right? Nobody's ever asked me that question, by the way. Can it be more intuitive? I don't know. How's that for an answer? On that one, I don't know. I don't think so, because you have to keep in mind that what we're talking about right now, you and I, like I just asked you to repeat that question, right? Like I didn't get that. Repeat that again, right? And so as I'm talking to you, I'm also looking at you, but I'm also observing the visual cues around you, right? Now imagine we put 20 people around you, they're all talking, I'm trying to have this conversation with you, right? That would make it difficult. So we have to assume that not only from an AI programming language, the natural language understanding piece exists, the visual recognition piece also has to be in place, right? Because we've all seen people, you ever ask somebody about something and they give you an answer, but it doesn't line up with what their facial expression has. Like you ask the customer question, by the way, do you think you'll be able to make a commitment by Monday? And they'll go, yeah. And you hear that, yeah. But then you look at their face, you go, I don't know. I don't buy that, right? Your intuition says something's wrong there. And I think that's the gray area of where the machine could actually be better than an individual. It's going to limit the number of salespeople we need. So I hate to live in absolutes, right? Will they exist or will they not exist? I think salespeople will exist, but in a very different role, more of a supportive customer success, customer journey supportive role. And so the question really becomes is, where does AI, if I were looking at sales, I'm more focused on where can I use AI to make our sales better? Let's talk about revenue at a higher level. Let's kind of zoom out of salespeople and just look at the business unit itself. And there's so many areas that we can use AI to make us better salespeople. For example, or even generate revenue. One of the things that's really fascinating me right now in the AI is dynamic pricing. It's how do you deal with dynamic pricing? You know, companies like Salesforce have I forgot what the program's called, but it's configure, quote, and price. And the algorithm actually puts the whole bid together for you and the proposal. And if you move the percentage points up 1% or down 1% or a fraction thereof, it'll actually adjust the probability of winning the deal based on historical data. So that's one way that, the machine can actually help you. But pricing dynamics, aside from proposals, is also fascinating for the retail industry. Like if you look at groceries or even airlines or whatever, even restaurants, anywhere that there's a lot of mixed pricing, right? Think about the fact that one of the most untapped resources for profit generation is pricing. If you have, let's say, I don't know, 100 let's say 1,000 SKUs or 5,000 SKUs, different products, right? 5,000 SKUs. You as an individual can't adjust the prices according to the market, because that would be quite a job, right? To try to figure out what's the right price for the right market. But you have a machine that can do that. They can figure out what's the pricing in the market if you feed it enough data, and they can figure out where the price points are at. More importantly is they can also figure out bundled pricing. If you look at bundled pricing, they'll say, wait a minute, you know what? Lower it here, raise it here on that product, lower here on that product, put there, and all of a sudden it comes up with the mix to maximize profitability. That's where I get excited, because I see that as an opportunity, especially if you have large SKUs. Like if you have a furniture store with different types of furniture, it's going to tell you from the recommendation side how to bundle it, right? But from a pricing standpoint, it says, here's the ideal price point. Almost like that point of diminishing returns, you find the ideal point of inflection, right? You look at grocery stores. I think that's interesting. Like grocery stores where you have products that, go bad, like lettuce, right? So if you want to buy lettuce, in the future, what we're going to see is like LED pricing on the shelves. That's what we're going to see is LED pricings on the shelf. And all of a sudden, what you're going to start seeing is pricing being adjusted depending on how long the product's been on the shelf. So a piece of lettuce, price 1. 3 days later, another price. As it begins to spoil, the price goes down, and they'll find an ideal price to sell it and move it. Now, think of a grocery store. It has, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 SKUs. And being able to manage all that pricing, to me, that to me is the most exciting. How do you squeeze profitability with AI? So we can look at selling more, but now that I've got this, how do I sell more to my existing customer base? I was having this discussion with a friend of mine, and the first thing I said, look at Alibaba. If you go to Alibaba.com, I mean, today you can buy really complex pieces of equipment. And again, the prices can be adjusted and played with. So I think all that is fair game. Why? It's only possible because the consumer is that much smarter. That's the assumption I'm making here, that the consumer has gone through the learning journey. They're really saying, I mean, nobody says, oh my God, I want to talk to a salesperson. I love when they try to close me. I love when they try to influence me. I love the pressure they put on me. Nobody says that, right? So if we can eliminate the salesperson and continue the buyer journey, I think that's going to, that to me, that I think that's the improvement in technology that nobody's considering. The access to information more often than not. Salespeople have to accept the fact that, like, the world of CRMs is here to stay. Right? One of the biggest complaints is we don't have enough data in the CRM. I think salespeople need to change their attitude. There was a time where the CRM was looked upon as like Big Brother, right? It's managers use it just to monitor people. That's not it. The CRM today it should really be called like an intelligent CRM. Because as we start bolting more things on there, like adding more things, like more sales enablement stuff, more sales engagement, applications, APIs, whatever it may be, the CRM now becomes like the hub of where, if you load this thing right with all the data you want and need with your customer base, and then your company can provide the supportive data sources, this thing now becomes like your second brain for selling. And that's what you can leverage it. I think that shift in mindset, and it's like garbage in, garbage out. If you don't put the information in, you're not going to get anything out of it. And I think the biggest challenge for a lot of salespeople today is putting the information actually in the system. And I'm super excited that I interviewed the CEO from Chorus.ai, and he said something really interesting. He said only 5% of the conversations actually make it into the CRM, which is what they're trying to change. Now imagine now we're doing this call via Zoom. This call is now recorded, and that's jammed into the CRM also automatically. So that piece of technology, the analysis of this conversation, is now put into the system as well. So I'm super excited because I see all these things being bolted in, and this becomes like the ultimate sales tool for a salesperson if they leverage it correctly. So that's my answer. That's the one thing. Believe in your CRM. How's that?